So for everyone just joining us, thank you for coming in onto the webinar today. We're really looking forward to speaking to everyone about MBA admissions. It'll take a few minutes for all the participants to sort of upload and get on the webinar. So we'll just take a few minutes and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, so I think we can get started. My name is Kim Dixit, and I am the CEO and co-founder of the Red Pen. We have been in operation now for 10 years, based out of Mumbai. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this MBA webinar. This is one of our most sort of awaited events of the year, and I think we kind of lost a little track of it last year because of the pandemic, but we're very excited to be offering this again this year to all these sort of potential prospective MBA applicants who want to know more about the process and understand how to approach, this very, very competitive landscape of MBA admissions, global MBA admissions. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Red Pen. We are, like I said, we've been around for 10 years. We are based in Mumbai. We have consultants in 7 global locations, and we have helped students access 1,000 or more selective universities across the world. We do, every year help literally, I mean, whether it's with full package applications, whether it's undergraduate, early advising, postgraduate, MBA, or boarding school admissions, we do help literally, a few thousand students every year. So that adds up very quickly. And again, whether it's just advising them or helping them with their applications or however you want to sort of count the number, we do interface with quite a lot of students every year. One of the things that I think sets the Red Pen apart when it comes to, how we work with applicants is, we are members of global professional organizations, which include, in this case, what's relevant is AGAC, which is the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. And AGAC helps us access, sort of best-in-class information about the admissions process. It gives us direct access to admissions officers at top programs globally, and also to professional colleagues who who maintain and kind of promote high ethical standards. So AGAC does have requirements for its consultant members to, to sort of uphold and maintain certain, ethical and professional boundaries. And so we are always, very clear about how much we help students and what we can, applicants, and how we can support them and how we cannot support them. So just want to make that very clear from the outset that we do consider this to be a very sort of serious professional obligation, and we take that that kind of mantle, I guess, seriously when it comes to how to make sure that every applicant, puts in the best application they can. So that's the Red Pen. I think I will now hand it over to Preeti Wadekar, who is our who leads our MBA team and will, I think, take the rest of the event forward for the rest of the morning. Preeti, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Can everyone hear me? Great. So thank you, Kim. My name is Preeti Wadekar. I'm heading the MBA Admissions Consulting Service at the Red Pen. And I just wanted to, set the stage before we jumped right into the panel discussion. So these were, some of the schools where, our applicants got in the last cycle, if in case, anyone is interested in knowing what kind of schools we work with and applications. So I just wanted to just put this out there, some of whom are on the panel today, and you will talk, and hear from them. Next, I just wanted to take some time to just discuss these criteria which admissions officers look for when they're evaluating your profile for the fit of their program. Okay, there is a lot to speak on this particular topic, but I'm going to keep this short because everyone is interested in hearing from the panelists. But what I want to say is these are these 6 criteria, through which your application is going to be viewed. If you see, the bottom of the pile is academic potential and work experience. That is the base of the pyramid. You just cannot have any way around this. So you need to have solid, ACADS, as well as work experience, which is required to fulfill your post-MBA goals and, to be admitted to the particular MBA program that you're applying for. Of course, your goals matter to the school. Demonstrated leadership, how have you been involved, whether this is professional leadership, community leadership, or, even personal leadership in your personal life. Extracurricular activities, what sets you apart, how can you add to the diversity of the MBA pool. What schools look for is they're looking for diversity in terms of interests and career goals and professional work experience, but they're definitely looking for similarity in values when they talk about fit with a particular program. All right, and when you are putting an application together, all these criteria are going to be evaluated through your essays, letters of recommendation, resume, application form, and interviews. I do want to just take a pause here and tell everyone who's applying this year, make sure you do not repeat information. If things are written on your resume already that you are, let's say, for example, a banker, do not write in your essays that, I have been a banker for so many years and so many, because they already know that. Schools are being very strict with their word count on essays. They want you to convey as much information as possible with very little word count. And they're giving a lot of real estate across all these, components of the application for you to tell your story. All right. So I just wanted to just set the context for this. And yeah, we will jump straight into the panel. This is today's panel, right? I am going to have every one of the panelists introduce themselves, right? So guys, let's get started. I want each of the panelists to introduce yourself with this information, right? Tell me, your name, the university that you attended, the current company that you work for, the schools that you applied to. The one you're finally attending is obviously on the screen. And the one thing why you think you stood out in the applicant pool. All right. So let's get started with Indrayan.
Sure. Thanks, Preeti. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Indrayan. I graduated in 2015 with a BTech degree in production engineering from VJTI Mumbai. I have close to 5+ years of experience, nearly 6 right now, of experience in private equity and allied fields. I had applied to CBS and Wharton. I finally got an admit from CBS, which was kind of my top choice. I applied to CBS because I wanted to pursue value investing there. I think the one thing that I guess stood out for me in my application essays was that I was able to demonstrate my passion for investing, and that I had a very focused goal of pursuing value investing even post-graduating from CBS.
Great, thank you, Indrayan. Ankit?
Yeah, hi people. Thanks so much for that, Preeti. So I did my bachelor's in business studies from Delhi University way back now. So I think class of 2012. So I think good 7.5, 8 years of experience before I'm applying for my MBA program. I currently lead, I'm the founder of an organization called Zomato Feeding India. and that's what I'm currently still involved with. I applied to Stanford Business School, so it was just one college for me, and that's the college I finally, fortunately got selected in. And I think, I think why you get selected is always a myth, but I think if I had to put one placeholder, I would think a bold vision and probably a unique past record was probably a thing that played a factor here.
All right, Aishwarya.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Aishwarya Taminidi. I went to the Vellore Institute of Technology. I have a BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering, but right after I pivoted into the social impact sector. My recent role was with the University of Chicago Trust's Social Impact Consulting Program in India. It's called the International Innovation Core. For my MBA, I applied to HBS, Kellogg, Yale SOM, Duke, Fuqua, and Cornell. And as you can see, I will be attending Yale SOM. Insofar as what helped me stand out, I would say I exhibited a lot of vulnerability and honesty in my application. I have a very unconventional story, and I decided to showcase it with a lot of confidence, showcase the emotional side of myself when it came to why I care about social impact or why I made certain choices, which I strongly believe helped me stand out.
Great. Thanks, Aishwarya. Harshita?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I did my undergrad in IIT Kanpur in the year 2016. Since then, I've been working 5 years at the Boston Consulting Group, where I'm currently a consultant. I applied to 5 schools: Wharton, Stanford, Harvard, Kellogg, and Booth. And as you can see, I'll be attending the Wharton School with a 40 fellowship. The one thing that I believe stood out in my application was the fact that I was a national level swimmer in 2 countries, Papua New Guinea, where I did my primary schooling, and in India. And the fact that in my stories, I showed deep self-awareness and how swimming shaped my leadership style and motivation. So I believe that self-awareness and that reflection may have been what stood out.
Great. Rajan?
Hey, hi everyone. This is Rajan this side. I graduated 2017 from IIT Bombay. Since then, I started working at McKinsey. I did 2.5 years at McKinsey. Right now, I'm working at a company called MSD. It's a pharmaceutical organization. I work as the chief of staff to the India region. In terms of applications, I did 2 applications, one in round 1, one in round 2. I know slightly less in terms of number of applications, but yeah. So round 1 was Harvard Business School. I got the interview, but I did not make it. I got a ding after this. And the second round was London Business School, and I'm going to London Business School this fall. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Great. Rajan, what do you think that, why do you think you stood out in the applicant poll? What worked for you? What do you think?
So I think there were a couple of things that I personally think worked for me. Were like, one was the description and the link of why I wanted to do an MBA and what my post-MBA goals were, and how they linked up to how I grew, what my environment was, and how things shaped out to be. Second was being a part of the healthcare industry. Working at McKinsey, I got a slight bit of that flavor, but right now I got very deep into the healthcare industry and realized that that's the real potential, and how moving to maybe London would actually help me shape and get to it better. So like things around this really help shape my applications is what I feel.
Great. Nilesh?
Thanks, Preeti. Hello, everyone. My name is Nilesh Shekhar. I graduated from IIT Kharagpur. And since then, I've had 6 years of work experience, across product management, consulting. I was in BCG. And currently, I'm working for Hyperverge. It's a US-based AI company. I applied to MIT and INSEAD, and I will be joining INSEAD this fall. I think one of the things, while, as many mentioned, it was a mix of many things that worked out, but one of the things that really stood out was, I guess, an early exposure to leadership opportunities. So I got the opportunity of managing an entire business unit for a company, entire India business unit for a company. So I think that really stood out, comparatively in my profile.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, so we're going to jump straight into the questions. And before that, I just want to tell everyone who's attending, thank you for taking the time. It's Saturday morning, not easy, but this is application time, application season. So, you're doing it for yourself. So anytime through the webinar you have a question, please post it in the Q&A box. If you have a question for a particular panelist, do write that this question is for so and so. So we know when we're taking the questions, or if any of the panelists have time, they can answer. Okay. All right. Okay, the first thing. So, let's talk about the timing of the MBA, right? The MBA is not a degree that, you can kind of just, it's not a one, right? So we have people on the panel with varying number of years of work experience. Now, I'm going to pick out two names and just tell me, why do you think that this was the right time for you in your career? One is, I would like Aishwarya to answer this question, because she applied about 2.5 years into her work experience post undergrad. I remember the first time we spoke, I mean, she was barely touching 2 years, and I was really worried if this is going to be the right time. But she was very convinced that this is the time. And then there was Ankit. Ankit was obviously going 8 years after, and he obviously had a solid career, everything going well for him. So in terms of timing, how did you guys decide that this is the time?
Shwara, you can go first. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ankit. So like I mentioned earlier, I was part of the social impact industry, and specifically in social impact consulting. So when I got into the sector post-engineering, it wasn't a sector that I knew a lot about. It was a sector that I felt a lot for. So when I got in, I assumed that what it took to be successful in the sector was a sound knowledge of policy, which is why, like most people who enter the sector, I initially thought I'd pursue a master's in public policy. But then, having spent about 2 years in the sector, I realized, A, that this is a very young sector. Most of the companies in the sector are relatively new. So I started to see that the policy skill set is something that people tended to pick up on the job. What mattered more on the job was your ability to manage a team, manage a project, manage a company. And it was these skill sets that were valued more by the industry. And that is evidenced by the fact that MBAs are always valued a lot more than people with a master's in public policy, especially in global consulting firms. So having spent about 2.5 years in the industry, I realized that without a management background, without that experience, I'd hit a little bit of a plateau in my career. And I saw that people who did get an MBA managed to get way ahead in their career despite being relatively young professionals. So it was because of these circumstances that I was 100% convinced that an MBA is the right fit for me, despite me coming from a relatively niche background and despite me being a relatively younger applicant.
Okay, yeah. So it was similar for me, because I ended up choosing, or kind of realizing that in the stage that I was with in my entrepreneurial venture, I reached a point where the organization had become a very strong foundation of sorts, and I could now step out as a founder and let someone else take up. And so really it was about just seeing that it was the right time for the organization. The team was there, there's a strong balance sheet, and that gave me the opportunity to now look outside, also find more opportunities to grow the organization, right? So that was the one big reason. I think the second thing was to pursue new entrepreneurial opportunities, and the timing couldn't be better. With I think with just what's happening with the world right now, I think there's so much difference in terms of how we need to think, and I think unusual times call for different thinking. And so I think this was a great. It was actually an interesting point to kind of sit back and say, okay, how can you think about doing things differently and doing different things altogether? So an MBA really served as a great option in that scenario. And of course, I mean, so those were the two big reasons. But of course, with COVID, we've all been in our houses too much. It never hurts to travel. So it was good to apply and kind of see that working out. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. So, continuing from that question, Ankit, did you ever feel that what value will an MBA at this juncture add to your career, depending on what what your goals were? You've been an entrepreneur through and through. You still harbor entrepreneurial ambitions. And many a times, when I speak to entrepreneurs who speak to us, whether they're coming from family businesses or businesses that they've found themselves, we always have this discussion around what new is a business school going to teach me, because I have learned so many things on the ground. And you did spend a lot of time, just creating and just, raising this organization. So what made you think that, an MBA will still add value? What about an MBA really drew you to the degree?
Yeah, so I mean that's an interesting point, right? And that, I mean, it required a lot of self-introspection for sure. Just thinking a lot about where you're at and what your long-term goals are. I think for me, as you rightly said, it's I think I stopped looking at things from a perspective of building a CV a while back. And in fact, like I left what I thought was my corporate career pretty early on. And so with the entrepreneurial side of it taking off, I think what was really important was for me to be involved with something where I'm developing solutions and organizations which are for the future and being deeply involved with them. So from that lens, really, like if you're kind of an entrepreneur as well, like one way is to just go out there and build something, but the other is actually to be in kind of an environment where there's a wide variety of learnings. And so NMB really gives you a unique place to do that. The networks, the kind of perspectives you develop are very unique because of the diverse set of people that come there. And I think really from an entrepreneurial side, I mean, if you really look at it, an MBA serves as a boot camp to develop and work on solutions. So from that side, I think it's a great opportunity to just be around some great minds and look at things differently, develop new insights yourself. And so that's a very big value add. Looking at things, kind of stepping out from your own zone and looking from things from a third perspective. And I think that's something that probably an MBA does best than any other course. So yeah.
Great. I think I just wanted to follow up on that question to Rajan as well, because Rajan again had some really great things working on this career. So Rajan, why had you always thought that, listen, I would go and do an MBA? Because we always have this pool of, the overrepresented category of the Indian male engineer. So did you always think that, listen, I'm going to do my engineering and this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to work at McKinsey and I'm going to get these roles and then I'm going to kind of time my MBA and go and do my MBA? Or did it all just happen organically? And the reason I'm asking this question once again is just for everyone to know, business schools do expect you to plan your MBA journey 2 years in advance. They do expect. It's an expensive degree in terms of time and resources. So that expectation is there. So Rajan, tell me something, that how did you approach this? Was this pre-planned, or did this come up after you started at either McKinsey or MSD?
Yeah, so I think quite frankly, I'll say it was more of a seesaw ride for me. Like I think when I was graduating IIT Bombay, I was slightly clear that before joining McKinsey, when I got the offer from McKinsey, I was like, yes, I'll do McKinsey, I'll do something, and then I'll do an MBA. But in between, for a year or two, things did fall down. Like I was slightly more comfortable in the corporate space. But towards the end of my tenure at McKinsey, what I started realizing is that there are a bunch of great opportunities that are available, and which not having a degree per se, but also not having the exposure to the international domain of things which are available is something that I'm missing. And therefore, this current role that I joined, like it's the role that I joined is a very structured chief of staff program that has been running for last 8 to 10 years. And there have been like, I don't know, like a lot of people who have went to various business schools, M7s, etc. So like, yes, when I left McKinsey and joined this program, it was very clear in my head, like I'm joining this to do an MBA. It was very clear with everyone that I was working with. And the same story actually felt in my essay and in my application. Like it helped me navigate the answer in a way, or navigate it to the team, that I am confident and I know that I'm making a informed decision, and I'm very much clear that I want to do it going forward.
Great, awesome. On that note, since we're talking about making specific career choices, Indra, you when you came to me and we said that we were looking, you wanted to study value investing. You're like, listen, I'm very clear that I want to pivot from impact investing to value investing, but there was nothing in terms of your prior career which had any kind of transferable skills. And this is something I want to share with everyone, that be very authentic in your story. Schools are not looking for any kind of a formula. Be authentic, do your research well, and that is what really stands out. Your story is unique, and every time we are working with every person, every time it's a new story, a new person, new context, and there's always something new with every person. Okay. So Indra, you're considering doing an internship before starting your starting business school to kind of jumpstart, that transition. Can you tell something, about that path? Because I think everyone might benefit thinking about that. Listen, I don't have anything in my prior experience, but my post MBA goal is to kind of do something completely different. So from the time that you get admitted to the time that you actually start business school, you can kind of do an internship in the area of where you want to go after your MBA. So can you kind of shed a little bit light on that?
Yeah, sure. So just to give a bit of a background, I was kind of always interested in the investment management profile since my, let's say, since my undergrad days, and I've heard of Columbia and the value investing course since then. It has been like a decade-long dream for me to get into CBS. With that said, I already had a career path and of working at a boutique consulting firm for a couple of years and moving to front-end private equity, where I did a couple of transactions in Southeast Asia and South Africa. Over time, I realized that my passion lied more towards the public side of investing, which I had been doing all along as kind of my side passion. So I think it made sense for me to apply to Columbia. And as you rightly pointed out, it is kind of expected, or I think it's kind of necessary for people to get a hang of what they want to do post MBA. Because the pre-MBA internship period gives you a right opportunity to understand if the career decisions that you would make after your MBA would be the right one for you. So I kind of I think put in my I got my put in my papers in a couple of months after that, and I signed up for an internship role at a hedge fund in Bombay, just to get an experience of the public side of investing. And I think I just finished that role a couple of weeks back, and yeah, it's been a very fruitful experience in that sense. So I think a pre-MBA internship is kind of necessary for people who look to change careers, just to get a hang of the work culture or the experience that they might expect post MBA.
Yeah, I think that is a great piece of advice, and many people don't know that you can do a pre-MBA internship, and that will definitely give you a head start when you are on campus, right? So now let's kind of change gears and move to test prep. It's one of those pieces in the application which everyone wants to kind of just get done with, and I want to just get done with this and I want to move on to the other parts of the application. Sometimes you get stuck, sometimes you have to give more than one attempt. So we obviously are not involved in test prep, but I'm sure people on who are attending today might be interested in knowing as to how did you guys go about test prep. So I would like each of the panelists to share at least 2 pieces of test prep advice with everyone who's attending. But before that, I want Ankit and Rajan to talk about taking the GRE over the GMAT. I get asked this question all the time. Schools are saying that they will accept the GRE, but will they really accept the GRE? Will they kind of prefer someone else because they have a GMAT score? And I keep saying the same thing, that if schools say they accept the GRE, then they will accept the GRE. So you should take the test which you're most comfortable with. So I want both Rajan and Ankit, and just so that everyone knows, Rajan did get an interview at Harvard Business School. Ankit is definitely going to Stanford. So it's not that, the GRE is a test which is not for the MBA. So I just want to, the answer is very simple, I know that, but I want Ankit and Rajan to just share, why did you choose to take the GRE and not the GMAT?
Ankit, do you want to go first?
Okay, sure, why not? So my answer is rather simple. So I took the GRE because I went to Stanford's website and they said that they accept the GRE. And I think they do accept GMAT too, but I didn't feel the need that I need to really analyze things. I think broadly, both the exams test you on pretty much the same parameters. I mean, very broadly, if you really look at it. And it's more like a filter for the college to decide if you're sound from one perspective. But really, for me, I didn't think it would make that big a difference. So it just said it on the website. And I think to that, I get this asked a lot after being admitted to Stanford. And I think then maybe there's a tendency to overthink things, but truly, I think some of these things are really straightforward. And so for me, I just really trusted the application process and what the website said and what the AdCom was saying in session. So I didn't feel the need to think beyond that. If the college is saying that they are accepting a GRE score, just go out there and give a decent attempt at GRE and you'll get in. And so it's not it's not very complicated in that sense.
Yeah, I think Ankit, you said pretty much all of it. Like, I think I'll just add one more thing, and this was actually a deal breaker. Like, so I was slightly late in giving my GRE GMAT, so I gave it sometime around last June or even July, if I remember it right. And there were some technical problems with GMAT online which were not there with GRE online, and that's the reason I gave GRE. Like, I spoke with a couple of people. They were like, it does not really matter, and do what you think would be the best decision for you. And when I realized that GMAT online is not as good, or it sucks actually, and like therefore I was like let's just not do it. I'll go ahead with GRE, and let's see how it goes then. So actually, the technical glitches made the decision for me easier. I do get this question a lot, and I know people are confused about it, but what I've realized, it does not really make a difference. Like, it's a very simple conversion from a GRE to a GMAT, which you can do it on official GMAT website. So if you know how it goes, so it's very interchangeable.
Great. And I want, other guys to also share some test prep advice. I know some of y'all were like super high GMAT scorers. I don't remember everyone's scores, honestly. But I do remember Aishwarya and Indrayan. They had 760 and 770. And but I want you guys to kind of just tell me, apart from this is not a conversation about test prep help and all those things. It's about how do you approach, how can you give 2 pieces of solid advice, which after this call, people who are preparing for the test can actually say that, okay, I didn't know about this and I can use this in my prep.
Okay, maybe I can.
Want to go first? Yeah, Nilesh, go ahead.
Yeah, Nilesh, go ahead.
All right. Thanks. So I just had like 2 points in mind, which I thought maybe I can share. I think if I had to give my 2 cents, first would be, to not treat GMAT exam as an exam for English or an exam for maths, right? These are just 2 subjects to test, your overall logical reasoning, your overall stress management, time management, and prioritization under stress, right? So I think, if you go by that logic and you start approaching the exam and you don't, measure yourself on, how much in depth you know the concept. Rather, I mean, it's important to measure that, but, measuring more on how much time are you spending per question, how are you reacting in stress, which questions or which areas are your strength, which areas are your weaknesses, right? I think that would lead to a better result. I think second thing which I may, remember about it is to be very, very consistent with the preparation, in the sense that while the exam says that, you have to put in 100 hours, to get a good score. But again, every starting person has a very different starting point, right? So I think it's also very important that you identify what are your weak areas and you, do practice consistently every day, rather than just picking one topic, completing it, and then moving on to the next one. So I think that these 2 pieces of advices I would like to give.
Great. Go ahead, guys.
I'll take
I can go next. So yeah, Harshit, I can go.
Okay. Great. So my first piece of advice, and I'm just picking up from where Nilesh left, he was mentioning on identifying your weak areas. And that's where my first piece of advice would come in, is when you're starting your prep, once you're, just comfortable with the, how the exam is, what are the different topics, you should just give a diagnostic test, which is part of the, which you get when you create an account on MBA.com. Just give that diagnostic test, see where your strengths and weaknesses lie, because, some of us, may think that, quant is strong for, maybe strong, but when you give the test, you may realize that there are certain topics within quant that you're not strong on. So, just give that diagnostic test to identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then create a plan accordingly. And my next piece of advice would be, once you're comfortable with the concepts, you should try, bring in timed practice as part of your prep. So instead of just, practicing questions one after the other, maybe just what I used to do, from the official guide, I would pick out questions with mixed difficulty levels and create a set of these questions and time myself as I solve them. So I used to keep a time tracker. Let's say I picked out like 2 difficult RCs and just saw how long did I take to answer these questions. So just keep timed practice as a part of your preparation. It will definitely help you get accustomed to the exam environment on that day.
Great.
Just to add to what Nilesh and Harshita just said, I would add just 2 things. One is start very early. I didn't do that, and had I done things differently, I would have definitely started a couple of months early. It takes around about, let's say, 2 to 3 months from start to get to taking your final GMAT test. So I had last year I had appeared for GMAT in August, and my application deadlines were in September. So it wasn't a very pleasant experience. Also have a routine in place. The lockdown really helped since I saved time on thing. I used to use that to get mock tests or practice my weaker sections. And I would lastly say this, that you should study from the right study material. Sometimes what happens is that if you're planning to score, let's say 750 plus, official guide might not be the right study material for you, because not a lot of difficult questions are covered there. So last year, what GMAT had launched was that there was this advanced GMAT book, which contains like 300 odd difficult level questions, 750 plus questions. So I extensively studied from there, and yeah, that helped me a lot.
That's very generous of you, Indra, and thank you so much. Aishwarya?
Sure. So I completely agree with what Nilesh started off with. The GMAT is not an exam about how much you know. It's about applying that limited knowledge that becomes part of the GMAT syllabus and thinking about it in a certain way during the test. So I get asked by a lot of people whether they should take this class, whether they should supplement it with this book. So I personally feel like since the syllabus of the GMAT itself is simple, my advice would be just pick one material. If you think that you need a class in order to brush up your fundamentals, go ahead and take a class. If you think that you can read a book like the Manhattan Study Guide, which I personally use, you can go ahead and do that. But don't spend too much time trying to read and reread the concepts from different materials. Instead, jump into doing practice questions and practice tests as often as possible, because that's where you get a genuine feel of what the exam feels like. That's where you can work on building how you think about each question. So, and also mirroring something that Harshita said, after you take every mock test or after you do every problem set, make sure to spend time the same day going back to your errors, because I strongly feel that you make errors on this exam not because you don't know what the concept is about, but it's because you may have made some sort of logical error in the way you think. So when you check back your errors and try and understand where you got it wrong, then you prevent a wrong way of thinking from getting hardwired into your mind. And under a stress situation, you will think in the right format. The second piece of advice is the GMAT is also a lot about managing your stress during the exam. Sometimes you tend to underperform in the exam, especially when you put yourself under tremendous pressure. So also spend some time thinking about how you feel about the exam. Don't prep for more than 3 hours a day if you think it's getting overwhelming for you. If you're comfortable giving the exam within 3 months, try and finish off your exam within that time. Because I've noticed that people who try and spend, say, 5 or 6 months, or some people have spent 1 year also on the exam gets very frustrating. It'll annoy the shit out of you. So make sure that you plan your prep in such a way that you are at your optimum level when you take the test.
Great. All right. I think that was all good advice on test prep. I know Rajan and Ankit spoke about GRE already. Do you guys have to add anything about GRE prep? Any tips?
No, I think
I'm going to you heavily. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying is like it's very similar to GMAT. I think just play on your strengths, just practice continuously. Like everyone is saying, like don't make it a staggered thing. Like make it a continuous process and like practice daily, and you should be able to get it through. Like it's not like don't overstress on it, and just like I think Preeti has highlighted this, but I like to highlight it again. Like it's one component of your application, it's not the application. So like just make sure you treat it that way. Like don't let the other components of your application die down because or don't get enough attention because you wanted to get a 750 and not a 730 and whatever. Like, and just for everyone's reference, like I was a 326 GRE, which is a 710 GMAT. Like just.
Yeah, and I'm glad you, Ankit, do you have anything to add? Sorry.
No, just a +1 to what Rajan was saying. So I totally agree. I think it's just one component of the application. I mean, there's so many components of my application which I thought were not good. My college marks are something I could never change. I was definitely in the bottom 25% of my class in college, and but I mean, it's not what you kind of like really focus on, right? You need to show the overall potential of the application, through the entire application, and so. I think focusing on the exam is definitely a good thing, but then kind of ending it there and focusing on the bigger picture is my general, I think, piece of advice. So +1 to what Rajan was saying there.
Okay, great. I really liked, that Rajan touched upon this point that, it's not the part, because I think everyone, I'm talking to so many people this time of the year and they're like, I have a 730 GMAT, I need to get a 760. Otherwise, I cannot apply to Harvard or Stanford or Wharton or whatever. I'm like, no, it really doesn't matter. And I'm glad, Rajan touched upon this point, because while I don't know the exact scores, Rajan did tell his, but both Harshita and I think Ankit as well, they also had what others might think is a lower GMAT for the schools that they got into. Okay. So I would reiterate that it's the whole application. When business, it's very simple. When business schools say that evaluate your entire application, they do evaluate your entire application. So it's literally as simple. That being said, if you have a 640 and you want to apply to an M7 school, take a step back and really check whether that is going to fly or not. A school like Stanford might still admit you, because they, time and again, I think I've seen that they really look at the bigger picture. They could say that, okay, on the test day you had a bad day or something of that sort, but be realistic. But then don't get bogged down by just the one metric, right? Schools will look at 2 to 3 pieces of evidence. For all those who are engineers on the call, I just wanted to also stress that if 2 people apply from IIT, it's not just IIT. Admissions officers will go through your transcripts and they will check your subject selection as well. So they know schools in India, they understand, subjects and what are the different streams and everything. So they will look at your transcripts in detail, right? So when you are approaching your application, we need to make sure if there is some gap in one part of the application, it is at least addressed in some other part, right? I think that was great advice on test prep. Now, let's move to one of my favorite parts, school selection, right? Some of y'all applied to just one school, right? Some of y'all applied to a broad range of schools. Now, Ankit and Indrayan, both of y'all were just focused on one school, right? Y'all were very clear that, this is where. So my questions to you is, when did you begin your school research? Okay. About 1 year in advance, 2 years in advance, when did you start? That's number one. Secondly, did you kind of have an MBA style decision-making, matrix, or did you all just go with a pure instinct that I know this is what is right for me? Because I had applied to one school when I went for my MBA. I was just convinced I wanted to stay in New York. I want to just go to Columbia, and I just applied to one. So I know that, but I want to understand from y'all, when did y'all start researching schools, and when did was there a process to zero in on just one?
Okay, I can go. So as I said, I knew about Columbia since my undergrad days. I was pretty much reading a lot of books on investing and stuff, and a lot of the writers of these books were adjunct professors at Columbia, and that's how I knew about Columbia. I at that point I never thought I would like apply to Columbia or anything like that. It was just like a couple of years back when I was like really introspecting about what I wanted to do in the future. I was in a private equity associate role. I wanted to move out of private equity to public market investing, and that's where it came to me that hey, Columbia is like the best place to study value investing, and I've already been interested in value investing, right? So it was more like I did not have any strategy in place, so as to say. It was more like I was just following my passion, and that's what I portrayed in my essays as well. But I would just say this: like if you are going ahead with a one school like a one school strategy, be ready to be rejected, and if you do get rejected, be ready to apply again next year. I was okay to like apply again. This I had Columbia not accepted me like last year. So yeah, because I was more focused on the course rather than the college. So since CBS was the only university in the world which offered such a course, that made my decision pretty much very simple for me to like just apply to this particular school. Yeah.
Yeah, so just adding in, I think similar to what Indran has said, but for me, I think somewhere the subconscious selection of colleges had started happening way before than I actually thought. So I'd always known that there are a lot of inspirational people coming from Stanford, and Phil Knight, a huge person I really inspired by, was the founder of Nike. So I think it was just that thing. But and I feel like in MBA college, like just selection, that is also an important decision, because you're going to spend 2 years of your life there, and possibly the next 3 years are going to be based on those 2 years. So while, I mean, you can always pivot and you can change things, I think it's a good thing to just research about what you're going for and being comfortable with the environment that you're going there. And so I was fortunate because traveling to that side of the world, I took out the time. I was intrigued by 2 colleges, so one more college apart from Stanford, and I happened to travel to both sides of the coast, visit both the colleges way back, just out of curiosity, in fact, for my own project and organization. And I realized I ended up speaking to a lot of students and professors, and I got a good understanding of the vibe and culture. And so for me, it was very clear from the beginning that Stanford and the kind of entrepreneurial culture that they really build, the amount of entrepreneurs who are coming out of Stanford every year from a batch of 400 is year on year increasing. And the second part, which is really trying to take shape according to, in all these schools, in fact, is I think just a robust focus on impact. And Stanford was really nurturing that. It continues to nurture that a lot. And so it has a lot of opportunities just into that. So I think that made my decision really easy. And I kind of felt that either it would be Stanford or there would be no MBA at all. And so I just ended up, following that gut feeling at that level, probably, it was more a gut instinct and just saying that you're a right fit and you should make that a part of your your life and your career moving ahead.
But you started researching schools, I could say, 2 years in advance, 3 years in advance?
Yeah, I visited both colleges. I think I think 2.5 years in advance, because my sister was she was in University of Berkeley, and so just handholding her with her own settling in, I think I ended up visiting both campuses anyway. So it was 2.5 years back, but I didn't know I was going to apply anyways. But so that helped. I think just traveling, but even if you don't get to travel, I think just connecting with people, getting to understand the vibe of what the students are. There's a clear pattern that you can see if you talk to more than 3 or 4 students from any college, right? And you can see if that's a fit for you. And I think that's more important than how much we treat it currently. So
yeah. So this was a very focused kind of a strategy. So I think anyone who's attending and is fixated on one school, know that it is okay. It is okay, right? But do follow your instinct and choose the school for the right reasons, and it should work. That is, I feel it is 50% of the work right there. If you have the right list of schools that you're applying to, based on your post MBA goals, your personal goals, and your cultural fit, 50% of the work is done right there, right? Now, I want to ask, I think Rajan and Harshita. Harshita obviously applied to a broader set of schools, and Rajan did apply just one in round one in round 2. But I know from my interactions with him that, Rajan, we went back and forth on like researching programs and saying, what do we think about this one? What do we think about this one? Eventual decision was obviously yours. But how did you guys, approach this? Harshita, you actually ended up applying to a lot, but how did you all approach school research?
Okay. So the fact that I wanted to apply to the schools I mentioned actually came from, at BCG, a lot of my senior colleagues were going to these schools. So, through interactions with them, I actually, even before I started the formal research and application process, I did have a sense of what's the culture of the school, what's the, what are the opportunities that exist within each school. So, that's where it kind of started. But when I formally started the research, it was a long process. I think even before I started applications, I started researching formally 6 months prior. But there were multiple aspects I used. So apart from attending the various admission events that are there, and now because they're virtual, so a lot of that's actually, you can actually end up attending a lot of more events than you would have in a non-virtual format. Apart from that, I reached out to a lot of people on LinkedIn. So through my existing connects, and even outside that, I approached a lot of people on LinkedIn, and told them that I'm interested. These are my goals. Just wanted to have a chat with you on my profile. What are the opportunities? So I did a lot of that, and when I reached out to them, I asked them to refer me to like 2 or 3 more people. So like that 3 kind of started growing out. Apart from that, also so the clubs I was interested in participating, I did reach out to the leadership, the student leadership of those clubs, and kind of try to find out, what is the focus of the clubs, what are the kind of companies that they go and visit on their treks. So through a lot of this entire research, I did get a sense of the culture. I did get a sense of how the school can help me through the courses, through the clubs, in achieving my goals. So I mean, it was not just one thing. It was like a list of avenues that I used for research. And just one thing I'd like to add, like the more research you do, it does help you narrow down your school list and decide like what school would be the right fit for you in terms of goals and like cultural fit. But another thing that happens with this research is while you're writing down your essays, if you kind of highlight in the application, the various things that stood out for you in your different interactions with the AdCom or with students or with alumni, it really brings a very personalized approach, and the school really likes that. The school will really, see your motivation and would really appreciate that, you spend like such a long time researching, and they really value that. So I think with this, the more research you do, you can actually kind of bring that out in your application as well.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Harshita. I think for me, it was slightly bit more unstructured than this much structured. So, and quite frankly, and I don't know if Preeti remembers, like I even was thinking about dual degree programs, doing MBA with law degree and like stuff like this as well. Like, so I was actually all over the place, to be quite honest. Like, one thing that I was clear on was these 2 schools, and quite frankly, and that's what essentially happened. Like, so I'll tell you where it was coming from for me. Like, I saw everyone, like all the people that I know from McKinsey, from IIT, everyone is applying to 4 or 5 schools, and I also felt that pressure, or whatever you call it, to think about and to apply to more schools and to more programs. Like I was fairly confident to always apply to Harvard and then to London Business School, but like the other things that eventually we talked about and I did not do it were more driven from a fact that I should apply rather than I want to apply, and therefore that's what I like to caution to everyone. Like you can choose whether it's actually important for you to apply to a broader school range. But yeah, absolutely, like Harshita said, a deeper school research, connecting to people, actually knowing people and understanding those nuances do help in your application, your interaction, and that comes out during interviews, etc. So that's something that I would really urge you to keep in mind.
Great. Now, both Nilesh and Aishwarya, both of y'all had applied to some MBA programs a year or 2 years before. And then you'll reapplied to some programs, but I think Nilesh never applied to those programs. Again, he applied to a completely different set of programs, but both of y'all primarily applied to a very different set of programs when you reapplied. So how did y'all approach school research the second time around compared to what you had done first time?
Aishwarya, you want to take the lead?
Sure. Thank you, Nilesh. So the first time round when I applied, it was very early in my career. And honestly, I think I applied for the wrong reasons. I was doing it because people around me were telling me that I should do it. So yeah, that's one entirely different piece of advice. Don't apply because other people are, only apply when you're ready. Um, when I ended up applying the first time round, obviously it was a very impulsive decision. So I ended up applying to schools like Columbia Business School, for example, which were not a fit for my profile. I'd completely ignored the element of fit. The second time round, when I started researching schools, that's why the first thing I did was to start very early. So I'd applied round one and I started my research sometime in early May. And I made it a point to go in depth in research, try and identify elements that fit with my profile. So instead of generically reading the school's website and looking at stuff that they're talking about, say their entrepreneurship club or their finance club, I instead looked for elements that fit my profile. So I would Google the school's name and Google social impact next to it so that I could get a sense of what specific offerings they have that line up with my profile. The next thing that I did was to actually speak to students, similar to what Harshita was saying. So I specifically looked for students who had my prior experience, had my prior background, and reached out to them and spoke to them about whether A, they thought the school had offerings that supported our area of interest, which was social impact. And second, whether the school also had significant representation of people from social impact, because I had to make sure that the school also considers me a good fit in their program. The next thing I did was to go to a lot of these admission events. So because most things happened virtual last year, there was an MBA virtual fair. There was, I think, US conducted a fair. So I made it a point to be at all these places. All the questions that I designed for the admissions committee were specifically tailored to my profile. So I would ask them questions about the social impact consulting club or the net impact club, or about what chances I had as an international to get recruited into a social impact consulting firm. So keeping it very specific to my profile, deriving that information really helped me see which schools firstly fit my profile and which didn't. That's why I was able to identify that schools like Yale were a much better fit to my profile than, say, other schools that I'd ended up applying to in the previous year. So that helped with my school selection. And second, of course, a subsidiary benefit is that when you ask specific questions to an admissions committee member, it ends up creating an impression on their mind as well. They keep that in mind when they're evaluating your profile. So it's a great opportunity for you also to demonstrate your passion for your line of work and your passion for the school that the admissions committee member is from. So I took a much more structured approach to research. That's the first takeaway. And second, the research was very much tailored to my specific line of work because I had to identify fit this time around.
Yeah, I think when I now reflect, I think the reasons which Aishwarya and Rajan were mentioning, right? People around you do tell you what should be done, right? I think I had just started my career in BCG, right? And people were telling me that you are sort of ticking all the profile boxes. You have done well in IIT, your grades are good. You are working with a good consulting firm, right? You are you have a good GMAT score, etc., etc. And no, why don't you apply now? You definitely should apply to the top programs, right? I think what was missing in the first time was the purpose, right? I was not able to defend why an MBA is needed at that juncture of my career. Why an MBA itself is needed, why then it is needed, and why those schools are needed, in order to reach wherever I want to reach. So that was a clear-cut, realization that getting an admit is not just about ticking profiles or ticking certain boxes. It is about figuring out whether it really lies, in your story, and how can it really help you take where you want to go. In the second time, I think it was a very strong match because what really happened was that the CEO of my organization, he mentioned that in 2022 we are planning an expansion in Europe, right? And he wanted me to lead that expansion. And obviously, if you are a B2B SaaS company, meaning that your clients are going to be organizations, right? You're going to be hiring people who are local and leading them. So it totally makes sense to have a good network in place. It definitely makes sense to have a good credibility, so that a good brand can follow you and clients can listen to you, etc., etc. And it also, the when part also made sense because the strategy also had a deadline to it, right? So I think the purpose became very, very clear. School selection became very, very clear. And how I then, went about researching the school was simply, I went through their websites. I spoke to the alumni, understood, and as Aishwarya was saying, ran my profile through them and tried to understand if there is a fit. Fortunately, a lot of fit could be discovered. So yeah, that's how it happened.
All right. With regard to school, research, this is, I think, one of you touched upon this, very valid in COVID times. How did you network with adcoms in this whole virtual format? Okay. We are attending some of the events hosted by admissions committees, and they say things like, if you are showing up and, you're keeping your camera off or just jumping off without any, how did you network? Or, some of y'all spoke about some questions. And I also want to touch upon a question which I was asked recently, which I had actually not thought of, or I had no answer to. And perhaps we can, that, maybe I show up, on a webinar, which is hosted by adcoms, and, I'm networking with them, and they're like, what if they don't like me? What if they don't like me and they have made an impression about me? And what if they read my application? They're like, oh, we know this guy, and we just, or girl, whatever, and we don't want to. So of course, my response to that was, listen, this is an opportunity. Now, what you make of the opportunity is totally in your hands. You could totally blow it up, or you can. It depends upon what place are you coming from. If you come from a place that I need to kind of impress these guys, I don't think that's the right way to approach it. If you're going to be very honest and authentic in terms of really doing your groundwork and research and engaging with them. And one of the schools I remember, I'd read this somewhere that, when there were in-person interviews, they would actually ask, the receptionist that, how was so-and-so applicant with you? So how do you behave? How are you? They would probably see that in all your interactions. So, one is in this virtual format, how did you all do it? All of you all applied in the COVID year. So how did you all do that? And what do you all have to say about, about this aspect that, what if someone doesn't like me? Yeah, how did you guys approach it? Anyone can take this question.
Okay, I can try to answer. I think I was never worried. I'm not sure, but this question never came to my mind if the person is going to like me or not. But how I can share how I went about choosing the people or choosing the topics that I want to talk about. I selected talking to people who were very, very similar to me in terms of the profile, who had maybe an engineer, male engineer IT background, or a male engineer and product management / consulting background, right? And or they post their MBA are pursuing something which I want to pursue, right? I think that's how I went about selecting the people that I want to talk to. And I had done my research about the questions that I want to ask, about their profile, and I kept the call very short. I kept the call very, very specific and pointed, so that they also don't feel that their time is being wasted, etc. So I think that is how I interacted with the alumni or the current students. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
So yeah, maybe I can go next. If ideally for me, and this might be a slightly controversial answer, so people can take it the way they want to. But when I think about B schools, I also think of them as a profit-making entity, right? So they are actually, in the end, a profit-making organization who are also looking for good talent, and having that confidence in you that it's not just that you need to impress them, that they also need to impress you. And I think some of my co-panelists did touch on that point, finding out whether they are also a good fit for you or not. So actually, like, not overthinking on the fact that whether whatever I'm doing, I'm able to impress them or get to them, whether I'm able to touch them, but also as a matter of fact, thinking as in the sense that why won't they be impressed by me is how I usually went about it. Maybe a slightly bolder approach to things, but I always thought of it as a give and take or an interactive relationship rather than me pushing the case, and that really helped me keep up my confidence, keep up my morale during the process, and like it might be something if it helps a few people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to add to what Rajan was saying. So I think, one interesting way that someone could take, and I don't mean to prescribe it, but it might be interesting if you want to change your perspective, is imagine if you've already done a successful MBA from that college. Now, what would be those questions that you ask of the AdCom member to be able to get further opportunities for your long-term objectives? So better jobs, better resources from college. And chances are, if you're asking those questions, that gives two thoughts. Number one, it makes you plan better for what you plan, have to do next. Second, it tells the college that you're not just interested in coming to the college, but you're also invested in actually growing after all. And so you really want to use what's on campus. And I mean, it's a win-win, right? So I think that's an interesting way, I think, adding to what just Rajan was saying there. And I think to what you were saying, Preeti, in terms of, I think thinking or being scared about what would happen on your first, AdCom session. I mean, that's the first time I heard that, but it seems a bit counterproductive though, because I recall a conversation with an alum and he said something interesting. He said, think of your first conversation with an AdCom member as your first date. So you want to try, but you don't want to try too hard, because if it doesn't work out, you don't want to be there for too long, right? So if it doesn't work out, it's not meant to be. So you shouldn't be too scared about the first conversation. You should rather look at it as an early way to build a relationship. And there are more chances that if you just come across as an authentic person without trying too hard, you will form a better relationship, which will be a value add to your application. So
yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And just so that everyone knows, all of these panelists, they were in the driver's seat. They really own their applications, and that's what everyone should do. Anyone who's applying to business school should be in the driver's seat. They need to have a deep interest in every part, a component of the application, research, fit, essays, everything. And you need to have an opinion. If you're going to kind of just sit back and say, okay, maybe that works or maybe that doesn't work, I don't know, I'm just shooting in the dark. That's not really, a very smart way of going about things. So I think you need to be in charge. You need to see what your comfort zone is or not, right? All right. So I think that was, all about school selection. I don't know if we have any questions about school selection, but we'll take that later. Now, like from school selection, we are moving into some interesting parts. Differentiating yourself. Okay. Some of y'all, not some of y'all, actually, I think probably just Ankit, like highly differentiated applicant, like highly. The very few founders, of social enterprises who would apply. And Ankit is very humble about this, but I remember when I first saw his resume. In fact, I had seen this webinar by another consultant when they were talking about how to approach the application for one of the top schools, and they said there's a 2% population who can write an essay at the back of a paper napkin and still get admitted, and Ankit probably is one of them. He's very humble about it, but he was highly differentiated on what his journey was, to take a risk at the age of 21 to start a social enterprise, dive like head in and build it ground up and scale it. There are many organizations which are doing what he's doing, but to scale it is, was a differentiator. And like he said at the very beginning, that having a bold vision, right? But for the most part, there are overrepresented, applicant pools. And there is always a challenge of how do I differentiate myself? What do I say? What do I write? If so many people from Big Four firms apply, so many people from consulting firms apply, so many Indian male engineers apply. One, a thing about US business schools, if I'm talking about in specific, is that, there is a larger representation of the domestic pool, right? It's definitely 50%, 40% or more. And a smaller representation of the international pool, and within that, or a subset is going to be the Indian international applicant, which is what primarily we at the Red Pen work with. So we see that every single time. We are, of course, trained in a way that we see someone's story and we say, okay, this is very unique about you or unique about you. But my question is now to Harshita, Rajan, and Nilesh. Okay, Harshita came from, again, a consulting background. Many consultants apply across the world. And Rajan and Nilesh, in fact, did have consulting. You guys had consulting on your backgrounds, plus y'all were, engineers, the Indian male engineer category. What strategy did y'all think about when differentiating yourself?
So I can start. So, you rightly said, consultant, I had the IIT background as well. And on top of that, like Preeti, like you had mentioned in the beginning, I also had like a 730 GMAT score, which is kind of it's the average for these M7 schools. But if you compare that with, Indian consulting IIT applicants, I mean, it's actually below average, right? So, but I kind of decided to look beyond that. And, I realized that, my professional life, what I'm doing right now is just one aspect of my life. Like, that's one aspect. There's so many other things I've done in life, right? There are extracurriculars, even while being a consultant consultant in my workplace, I'm involved in many other activities. Like I'm part of the women initiatives. I'm part of, I founded an interest club in my workplace. So what I'm trying to say is that so being an engineer or being a consultant is just one aspect. You need to also focus on the other aspect of your life, your journey. And for that to happen, I think one thing is very important is to introspect. And introspect, like when you begin the process. So you need to, in this introspection process, you need to identify what really makes you unique, because until you identify that, you won't be able to put that on your application. So, you may be similar in terms of so many, your nationality, your background, but that individuality, that uniqueness is what you need to identify yourself first, and then kind of put that on the paper. But for people who are looking to apply next year, or they have some time, I would definitely recommend, like in your workplace or outside your workplace, do get involved in like other activities apart. So I mean, that will just add another dimension to it. You will be able to demonstrate leadership much better, and you will be able to talk about impact that you've created outside the workplace as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Rajan, you can.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so yeah, I think yes, it's the right question. Like there are a few overrepresented categories, but what I feel is it's also a function of number of admission places that you have versus the number of people that are applying, and sometimes like that ratio for good or less is more or less maintained. Yes, there are some exceptional candidates like Ankit who do apply, and there is slightly different thing. But for example, like I can talk about LBS. Like I know a bunch of MBB folks who are getting into LBS or who got into Harvard, right? And similarly, if I consider slightly underrepresentative category, like there would be slightly lesser number of people. So where I'm getting to is like don't be worried that you are in that category, because the net number of seats per student ratio, or if I'm bringing whatever like a term for you to validate what's your competition, would be more or less ballpark in the similar range. But having said that, like I said before, I think it's again a function of your application, your luck on that day, how interview goes, how other things goes, right? So I think there's no one way of knowing, but what I still say is having that confidence in you that yes, you are at par with what you're doing, and like as a holistic profile, what you bring in, you are able to bring in the best of you, and just taking that and applying is what is needed. And I think that's the only core thing. Apart from that, I think like quite frankly, I have seen people with 780 GMAT, my friends who were actually not able to get in, like 780 GMAT, 9 CGPA, and consulting, and then also doing healthcare, and not able to get in, right? And everyone is surprised. But I have seen people, like for example, like people with 700, 710 getting into with something different in their profile, and using it all together. So like what I'm getting to is like it's a package. Your profile is a whole package. You as a person, it's not just your background that defines you, but your other experiences, not just professional experiences, personal experiences, learning, and the other things that you portray that actually define the overall scope, and that helps you get to wherever you want to.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, Rajan. I think I should need to just cut this clip of what you just said, that people with high GPAs and high GMAT still don't make it, because there are other things. I need to kind of cut it, and I need to attach it as my email signature or something and say that, okay, see this, and then you can ask me any other questions, because I get asked this question way too often. Nilesh,
Yeah,
actually, when you came, you were doing some really cool things with this company, with this expansion. So I did think that itself, when I saw that, I thought that was bingo. Like that I thought was differentiated. But I'll let you answer. What did you think?
Yes, Preeti. So I think I approached this question by understanding what INSEAD is thinking, while crafting that class, of that particular batch. And what I figured, from the research was that INSEAD is interested in building a class of diverse individuals, diverse high-performing individuals, which have demonstrated leadership and who do have a global outlook, right? So I think if I have to, sort of bring down the key points which INSEAD was looking, so it was number one, having, a leadership exposure. Number two, it was about international exposure. And number three, it was about having a unique and diverse profile, right? So once I understood that, I played heavy on those areas, right? I tried to bring those elements of my profile very strongly, which INSEAD cared about the most, right? Through the essays, etc. And I think that, sort of was my strategy.
Awesome. We do have very little time, and we have like quite a few questions. So let's quickly move on to like the, what everyone is usually concerned about in applications, essays. Okay. Now I did have questions for each one of y'all. But let's kind of let's see. Let's have each one of you just talk about how did you develop your story and tailor it to every school application. Let's start from there. Anyone? Aishwarya?
Sure, Preeti. So there was a lot going on my profile. It was a very fuzzy profile. So to give you a brief overview, I'd moved from engineering into social impact, where I first had a more research-oriented role. And then I took a gap year for a couple of reasons that I'll touch upon later. And then I had a stint in social impact consulting for the other 2 odd years that I had of experience before I applied. So given that it was a very fussy profile, the first thing that I had to do is so since I was working with the red pen, the first thing we did was to go into, say, why I'd made the different choices and the different transitions that I'd made. Then we worked on identifying what were the good things that I'd been able to achieve on each role, what kind of growth I'd been able to achieve on each role. And that getting all the information out on the table helped us to first cut out all the fuss. And the story that we identified in the end was one that flows logically from one point to another. And that includes the fairly unconventional choices that I've made. So to touch upon the gap here, because I think this is something that can help applicants who perhaps have this disadvantage on their profile. So I personally took the gap year for a couple of reasons. I mean, I had a health concern. I decided to use that year to maybe take a shot at the civil services examination. There was a lot going on in my life at that time. So the first thing that I worked on doing is to, one, accept that there was this element of my profile. I mean, it sounds a little bit sappy, but I had to learn to not be ashamed of it. I had to learn to not see it as a disadvantage, and then work with my red pen consultant to identify what were the productive things that I'd gotten out of that gap year, which then helped me further my career, whether it was having learned more about the social impact industry, whether it was having interacted with more people. So putting all these productive elements of it into my optional essay definitely helped the admissions committee not only understand why there was that lacuna on my profile, but also to see me as a candidate who had the courage to make brave choices, I guess. So I guess in a nutshell, even if you have a fussy profile, you had a reason for making every transition that you made. Make sure to back yourself up and have confidence in those reasons. and make sure that they line up with the broader streamlined story that you're presenting that starts from, let's say, when you started your career, whether it was at your undergrad level or whether it was your first job, leading right up to your long-term goals. So as long as you can give a logical explanation for why you took one step after another, while coming across as someone who's very thoughtful and puts a lot of thought behind every decision that they make in their career, your story will 100% work. And and complemented with star stories, which are essentially stories of successful things that you've done in your work, and also complemented with other elements of your personality that display your passion for your work. You have all these sorted, your story will 100% work out.
I think Indra also wanted to say something.
Yeah. So I would just say this. So even after going through the entire MBA application process, I still think the entire process is a big black box, in the sense that nobody really knows who the outcome likes and who gets admitted and who gets rejected. So as somebody who had pointed out, I also have friends who have like 780 plus GMAT scores, and pretty much 5-6 years of good professional work experience at top consulting and private equity, and still didn't manage to get in any of the top business schools. So in terms of the essay, the way I went about this was, again, thanks to the Redmond consultant who like kind of helped me with the entire process. What I did was kind of have like 4 or 5 star stories of be it my personal background or my extracurriculars or any professional experience that I had, and kind of use those 4 or 5 stories to answer the essay questions that the university asks for. In my CBS essay specifically, I've touched upon the point of being passionate about investing and how that kind of influenced my decision to move to private equity post my undergrad, even though I had a engineering background and no education background in commerce or let's say finance. How that led me to a career path, and why I want to do an MBA at this point of time. I'm from Columbia, and once I have all those pieces in place, writing the essay is just like it won't take more than half an hour once you have all the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, and I think just so that everyone has some context, I think Indran's application was very unique because there was nothing in his prior experience that spoke about, had any connection to value investing. There's always this thing that, schools are looking for your post-MBA employability as well. So depending on, what your pre-MBA experience and career and education was, will those be transferable skills together with the MBA? Can you really realistically pursue a post-MBA goal, right? I mean, typically someone coming with a completely, non-finance background and wanting to go into private equity might first go into, investment banking, then long-term goal would be private equity. They're not saying after MBA, I'm just going to go into private equity. So those are, some of the things. But with Indran's, I think we were very genuine and very authentic. The same things, what he genuinely told us is what he said that, this is what the school would be interested in knowing. Not to kind of set a standard, but when he said that, he had a deep interest in the course which was offered, the value investing program which was offered at Columbia Business School. He had read so much, he had actually completed 60% of the pre-read which was required for the value investing program. And I give his example to so many people, and I said that is research. You cannot fake it. That is solid. You cannot kind of debate it. And it was, what others might think was like a very risky strategy to say that, yes, I may not have any prior background, but I am extremely passionate about value investing, and this is why your program is right. But I do think that is what schools are looking for. They're looking for your authentic voice. How well do you know yourself, your goals, where you're going, and that's the business leader that they're looking for. So thanks, Indra.
Thanks.
All right, for essays, I also want to ask about, I want this question for Nilesh specifically, because INSEAD tends to be a very sought after school for many Indian applicants, and it has a lot of essays. How did you approach the essay development process of INSEAD?
Yeah, I think it's a very exhausting process. And I think there are like seven or eight essays that we have to write for INSEAD. So I think it all starts with having a right central story in place, right? if I would have to, look and, reflect, then I would say that I spent 60% of the time, building that story and making it, very, very in-depth and detailed. And I think that story eventually flows down into your essays. So even if there are like 7 essays, 10 essays, 12 essays, right? Like for each question, what elements of your story you need to highlight, because you have the end-to-end picture in place. And when I mean, you have to have a complete story, it starts with your upbringing, in what circumstances were you brought up, what sort of experiences have you had, and how have those experiences shaped or created your personal and professional motivations. What did you do with those professional motivations, right? What did you start believing? And at this juncture of your life, let's hypothetically say you are at point A, and you want to in the next 10 years go to point C, right? So let's suppose at point A you have skills 1, 2, 3, and to reach point C you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So how is this point B, which supposedly is the business school that you're applying to, is going to help you get those 3 additional skills, right? And what are those 3 skills that you need? So I think once and why are those skills very, very essential to you? So if you have a good, strong personal story to back that up, I think most part of writing those essays, etc., would already be taken care of. And the end polishing is, it's just 10% of the effort, where you are just polishing to make the essay look more, the storytelling part to be much more, good to read. So I think, my advice would simply be to, make the central story very, very strong. And I think rest everything will follow.
Great. All right, we are running out of time, so I'm going to take 2 questions on interviews, and then I'm just going to have everyone just share some final words. Okay. So for interviews, I want to ask, some of you were interviewed by adcoms, and some were interviewed by alumni, right? Some were interviewed by both of you. For example, Rajan, I think for Harvard, you were obviously interviewed by the adcoms. LBS was an alum, and same for Aishwarya. So what did you guys think was the difference between an adcom interview and an alum interview?
Rajan, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So I'll say, to start with, adcom interview for me was just a 25-minute interview versus the alum was a 1.5 hour long chat. So I think, so it's essentially, I think adcoms, that's what I realized, that adcoms don't have that much time, and alums can actually give you time and can get into details. With the basic difference that I understood and what I gauged was, with an alum, they are usually from a similar background, like either from a similar profile or from similar location, who actually understand you and understand the place where you're coming from. And therefore things are slightly different, and you can use a few nuances which only are used in your particular industry or your particular domain. While with adcom, they are usually, it's a very generic person, like, because they don't know, they know about you, but as how healthcare functions in India, or as to how consulting works in India, that's something that they have a broad idea, but not in detail. So they can't get into those nuances, use those things. So the biggest difference was, with adcom, you have to like, and I'm using a consulting phrase, you need to explain to them like a baby, like how, so like that's what happens. And with alums, what happens is they expect you to be slightly more detailed and have some additional knowledge of things. Like you can't gas around with alums. Like you need to have clearer picture, not just giving a very broad brushing ideas, giving some more details so that they get it. While with adcoms, what I realized, it like getting into details did not make any sense, because it was getting too difficult, and therefore sticking to the point, and but at the same time telling your story is what was important. So I think these were the 2 differences that I actually felt.
My experience with the alum interview was actually very different from Rajan's experience. So I'd interviewed with an alum for Kellogg. And I think the reason it was different was because the alum that was allocated to me was somebody from the US. And even though he broadly worked in the same sector as I did, which was the government space, he didn't have a lot of context about my background or what I do, especially given the Indian context. So my interview with the alum and even current student interviews for that matter tended to follow a very uh, typical standard MBA question format. So I feel like in a lot of schools, the admissions committee gives these alum or student interviewers a standard list of questions that they're expected to cover. Like in Rajan's case, perhaps if the alumnus is someone with the same geographical and the same sectoral background, maybe they tend to ask follow-up questions. In my case, because that wasn't applicable, he tended to follow the questionnaire pretty strictly. So I guess one piece of advice coming out of this is definitely, if you know who your interviewer is going to be, whether it's an alum or a current student, make it a point to check out their LinkedIn, identify what they've done. If you see that there is some commonality or some potential for them to understand your background, you need to be a lot more prepared. You need to be prepared to answer questions on your feet. Insofar as my AdCom interview was concerned, I had an AdCom interview for Cornell. It didn't follow a very standard format. He, in fact, asked me a lot of questions that I wasn't expecting. So to give you an example, I'd mentioned that my short-term goal is to work for a more global development sector consulting firm. His questions were around whether I had done anything to already interact with these firms in advance, which is not something I was expecting. He asked me what transferable skills I had from my current role. He wanted me to explain specific context that could be applied to my future MBA career, which was again not something that you see on the standard MBA questionnaire. So my experience with the AdCom was that especially in this case, they asked me more pointed questions. I had to defend my goals a lot more strongly with the AdCom than with the alum. So I guess this just goes to show that there is a spectrum in terms of any interview, and definitely while going into the interview, go in with an open mind, prepare for the more standard questions, but at the same time be alert, because you might get these bouncer type questions that you have to answer on the fly.
Right, I think that was very useful, but I think everyone is kind of far removed from interviews right now. Everyone is at that stage where, okay, let's see first, let's get the interview, then we'll figure out. But of course, that's not what I recommend. We do recommend that start practicing at least one interview question every week, so that you're not just completely taken by surprise, or you're just not rushing to prepare. Okay. I do have a few questions which I want to take, but before that, I want each one of you all to kind of share final words. Okay. Final words in the sense that the MBA application can be a long drawn process. It can kind of wear you down. It can be exhausting. You're working a full-time job. You're doing these applications which actually need you to be kind of in a Zen space, reflect, be self-aware. Yet you're kind of going 200 miles an hour. I want to understand from each one of you that, what are the final words that y'all will leave applicants with? Y'all were in their shoes not such a long time ago. So now when someone is in those shoes, what would you like them to know? What would you have told yourself a year back? I would like each one of you to talk, so y'all can go in any order.
Which I can start. So basically, if you start searching on the internet, you'll have a lot of preconceived notions, right? 730 is not good enough for Indians. It's not good enough for like an engineer background. You'll get preconceived notions that if you don't apply an R1, you won't get a scholarship. I mean, there's just a plethora of information that if you just start reading everything, you will just be bogged down. You'll feel underconfident. I mean, do your research. That's that, but also do have confidence on your own story. Identify your unique points, find out what really makes you unique, stand out, do your research on the schools. I mean, it'll be better if you focus your time on that rather than worrying about things that, that you can't really change. And exactly, that's what I did. I did waste a lot of my time, spreading over. I did plan to apply in round 1 to many schools, but in the end, because I did not have like an application I was confident on by round 1, I kind of shifted few schools to round 2, with Wharton was also a part. If I were to go back and tell myself something would be to not worry about things that you can't control, just focus on things that you have in your hand, and do your research well, spend time on things that actually will be productive and matter, and just have confidence, basically.
Great. Nilesh?
Sure. I think I would say that, first be very, very clear on why you want to do an MBA or why you want to apply, right? It should be very clear in your head what you really want to achieve out of that experience, right? Second thing I would say is don't try to retrofit your profile to what a school really desires, right? Because what I have generally, observed when people do so, at least, when they say that, I'm interested in this, or, this is how my beliefs shaped, but your CV doesn't reflect that, right? Anybody who might say something, might have had a very different experience. So, adcoms are very, very experienced professionals, when it comes to screening profiles. That's their bread and butter, right? So you have to be really, really authentic. You have to understand what you really want to truly achieve out of this program or this process, and not retrofitting, rather understanding what elements of the of the program would you most likely make the use of, would be an important activity to undertake.
Indran?
Yeah. So I would just say this, like, don't underestimate yourself, because I definitely did when I was applying to CBS last year. And MBA application is not a place to be overly modest about yourself. Just be proud about what you've done in your past and achieved, and celebrate them in your application essays. Yeah, I think people sometimes suffer from this imposter syndrome. They typically question themselves if MBA is even the best choice for them, or if the school would eventually select them. But I would just say put your best foot forward, and yeah, just go ahead. If need be, cut out all the negative thoughts, and like yeah, be yourself and authentic.
Aishwarya?
Yeah, the stress is a very natural part of the process. So if at any point you're starting to feel stressed, don't worry about the fact that you're stressed. It's very important for you to learn how to manage your stress. So for me personally, speaking to some close friends, speaking to my partner, all of that was extremely helpful in keeping that in control. Reason being, it's a very long process. And throughout the process, whether it's at the point at which you're writing your essay or when you're appearing for your interview, it's important for you to feel that introspective self that's very confident about their profile. And if you are constantly stressed, I find that it affects your ability to introspect, think deeply, show your truest values and your truest emotions. So stress management is a very important process. So do anything that helps you reduce it. And also learn to compartmentalize and remember that in the off chance that it does not work this year, you will definitely get through next year. I mean, that's personally a philosophy that I live by as someone who didn't make it last year. And it worked out in the end, and I'm very happy with where I am. So I'm sure it'll work out for the rest of you as well.
Is Ankit and Rajan, both of you? Anyone?
Sure. Go ahead, Rajan.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Ankit. I think, yeah. What I'll say is, and I think I'll just echo everyone's thoughts. I think the core is having the confidence in you, and that's the most important thing. And like, be confident, be sure. Like, there is no typical profile that gets into an MBA. There's no right path to get into an MBA, like or getting selected in any program or any school. So what I'll say is like don't overthink on things which are not actually meant to overthink. I don't know if that statement even makes sense, but yeah, I think it's the whole concept of like the whole concepts of GRE, GMAT, what is the right score, when to apply, what all to prepare, what all to put. Like yes, give it the right adequate amount of thought which is needed, but beyond a certain point, take a decision and just be confident and just move along. I think it's very important that you move along the process and you are able to submit the right application at the right time, rather than like I think not being able to submit at all because we were overthinking on a few things. So like that's the only thing that I would say.
Yeah, and just I think I guess I'm the last one to just add in. So I think +1 to what everyone just said, but I feel like there's a clear pattern, right? And it's so obvious that when you start your application, there's a high amount of drive and motivation seeing these websites and these amazing campuses and talking to some of these people and imagining their life. And then once you start your application, you start, getting into that process, you just start going that down. So I think one thing is realizing that it's going to happen, right? It's okay. And it's a part of the process. And, but then it comes back up as Aishwarya was saying, right? Eventually. So I think one is like, it's easy to say be motivated throughout the time, right? But I think the one thing you can tell yourself is you owe it to yourself, right? And a lot of us do so many things for each other, but you got to realize there's a part of you which has worked so hard in your job at your college since the beginning, right? And so you're not doing it for anybody but that person. And if you don't put out an application, that person's not going to come out, right? So all you need to do at the very least, even if you're not putting up a great application, just put out an application. Like just tell yourself you're there, right? So your worst case scenario is have a substandard application, right? But you can always better it. And so I really see this as a win-win situation. At the very least, you will end up self-introspecting, gaining new perspectives about yourself, applying next year, as Aishwarya was saying. But at the very best, you'll get into a college that you dreamt of and you thought you could probably not make into or whatever it was for you, right? So I think you owe it to yourself, right? I think that's the one thing I'd say.
All right. Well, great. I think, we've been all, talking for over 1.5 hours, close to, 1 hour, 45 minutes. So I think that's a lot of good information. We did have about close to 35 questions, which we are not going to be able to take all of them, but there were specific questions for some of the panelists. So let me just at least make sure those at least get answered. I can't see. There was specifically a question for some of the engineers on the group. Okay, question for panel, specifically for Nilesh. How and why did you choose INSEAD over top 5 business schools in the US? And which INSEAD campus will you be going and how did you choose that campus? Oh, you answered that question already. Okay, great. Will everyone else also see that answer? Anyone apart from the person who actually asked that question? There was a question for Ankit, but I'm not able to see that. It was about, how do you, going from social entrepreneurship to business school, like, how did you put in, how did that kind of fit in with your application, that story? I can't see the actual question, but I remember seeing this question.
Yeah, I think I did answer the question, but essentially what I was really saying was that, looking at yourself from a problem-solving lens and not as engineers or, mathematicians or whatever. I think we're all problem solvers at a certain level. And so just talking about that, so it's not, you tend to bucket yourself in life. Hey, I'm a social entrepreneur, I'm a dash, right? And don't do that. You're way bigger than that. So I don't look at it that way. I don't think the college wants to look at you that way. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, there's a question which Nikhilesh has answered, but I still want to take it. Is that do you all differentiate between round 1 and round 2? Again, a question I get asked all the time. What are your thoughts about applying in round 1 versus round 2? Interestingly enough, many of you all on this panel have actually made it in round 2. Only I think 2 of you all have made it in round 1. So what are your thoughts? What were the things that were told to you or you all understood about round 1 versus round 2? And what is your take about applying in one round versus the other?
I would say you should definitely apply in the round in which you feel the most confident. You're confident about your application. So I did target to apply to like maximum number of schools. I applied to 5 schools. My target was to apply to at least 3 schools in round 1. I ended up only applying in 1 because I felt I was not ready. I didn't have enough time to put in my best, and hence I did move it out to round 2. Like I applied to 4 schools in round 2. But what I feel is that there is no. If you're ready, do apply in round 1. If you feel you need time to either give your GMAT to get like a better score, or you need time to polish your essays, I would definitely recommend that. Then in that case, you should apply to round 2 and not be afraid of that. there are many people who get admits and many people who get scholarships even in round 2. So I don't think that can be a deterrent.
Ankit, do you want to take that as well?
I mean, not really. I'm not the best, I think, person to answer the round 1 versus round 2. For me, I think it was definitely applying in one of the rounds. And it was, I mean, as long as they take folks in rounds, and which was true. So I didn't really calculate that. I think it was more for me, it was more about seeing timing. And from a work perspective, I didn't have the time to be able to apply in round 1 early on. And my decision was kind of made later. So the round 2 deadline usually is around January, and that was fitting my calendar best. And I think that's why I applied then.
Great. A question is, can I reach out to the panelists to discuss further on the application process on a one-to-one basis? If they are up for it, of course. I think we had anticipated this question, and I think we had asked this to the panelists, and I think what we agreed is that, you can reach out to them over LinkedIn, because they said, email was like a hot mess for some of them. So they said that, just LinkedIn might be, a better avenue for you to reach out and ask any questions that you want to. Is that correct, everyone?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Great. Someone has asked, I want to eventually move towards impact investing. I have an engineering background and now work in policy research. Also, I have 1.5 years experience in Big Four consulting right after college. How do I go about this? It's a very specific question. This question is asked by Vasudha. Vasudha, I think, questions related to like specific profiles is something I think, needs a longer discussion. Does anyone have an answer to that question? Yeah, I doubt. So we can take that later. I've specifically put my own, you can scan this QR code. If there are any unanswered questions, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to kind of answer them after this. A question for Nilesh: how important is regional language when you consider an MBA program in Europe?
So it depends on two things. First of all, where are you seeing yourself post MBA, right? If you are seeing yourself in Europe and not in, let's say, Amsterdam, Brussels, or London as the geographies, which are primarily English-speaking nations, or maybe Ireland to some extent, then I think language, knowing a European language like Spanish, French, German, etc., all these things do play an important role. But knowing to a level of, let's say, B1 or above, having a proficiency B1 and above will be important, because I think even in job interviews, they ask you these, they have like proper language interviews. The second thing is, there are some schools which have got an exit language policy, right? So you need to have 2 languages, which are your main language. You can put, let's say, if for Indians, they can put, Hindi as their native language. They can put English as the second language, right? And there is another third language which you need to have proficiency in, at least an A2 level proficiency in. And that is, I'm not sure if it applies to all the schools, but it applies to INSEAD. But getting an A2 proficiency is not that difficult. I think a week or 2 weeks of training in that language would be sufficient to clear that exam that they conduct, right? I have already, I already learned German in school for 6 years, so I was proficient in it, so I didn't face any challenge. But yeah, it will be like helpful to know this fact, that if you're planning to be in Indian, English country, English speaking countries, then it hardly makes any difference. But if you are, specifically targeting some other countries, other European nations, then it may be helpful.
Okay. Another interesting question is international experience very much required for M7 schools, or a multicultural experience is what they look for? Did any one of y'all think about this when you all were applying? That do I have a multicultural experience, international? Of course, INSEAD specifically says on its website that they look for international experience. But apart from that, did any one of y'all think about that?
I can go. I'm not sure if an international experience is a must. I don't think that is the case. but I definitely played that factor to differentiate myself in my application essays. So I worked at a private equity firm which had investments in Southeast Asia and in South Africa. So I've spoken about the experience I gained from my experience working at negotiating with Southeast Asian counterparts and of raising funds in South Africa. So that one thing was definitely one of the differentiating points in my professional experience. But I don't think it's a necessity to have, like, if you're applying to a M7 school, you can differentiate yourself in like different things, not just your multicultural experience.
Just to add on to what Indrayan was saying, I did think about this as well, and I didn't have international experience specifically. So I tried to read into why they are asking for international experience. And what I could get from it is that they want people who are able to work in very diverse teams. So one way of judging that obviously is people coming from different backgrounds and different countries. So since that was the underlying first principle that I was able to interpret, I instead decided to show how I'd worked with teams coming from different functional areas. I had some team members who had come from the United States, for example, and how I managed to successfully work with them despite being domiciled in India throughout that time. So just showing your ability to work in a diverse team, to be able to make the best of the experiences that everybody brings to the table is what will show the school that eventually you are someone who will succeed in an international team.
Another thing I would like to add is that when they mean international experience, it's not just about you going outside India and working there, right? In case you have handled international clients, spoken to them, sold to them, bought from them, right? Even remotely, like you being in India and then you have interacted with them, that also counts as an international exposure. So if you can bring in the richness of your understanding on what sort of differences have you found when working with people from diverse background, cultures, etc., I think that will be sufficient to prove your exposure.
Okay. All right. There is a specific question, I think, about second MBA, but I don't think anyone on this panel has had a second MBA. I don't know if they are the right people to answer that question. Someone has asked any suggestions on managing tuition fee. So yes, the MBA is an expensive degree, but it is considered as an investment and not as an expense. The post MBA salaries in the first 2 years after you graduate from a top business school is, supposed to recoup, the investment that you've made in the program. And that's why, they are looking for those leaders. I mean, you need to believe that this is an investment I'm making in myself and I can do that. There are obviously specifics about, managing tuitions in terms of how do I get funding. So there are loans, educational loans, there are need-based scholarships, merit-based scholarships, depending on the schools that you're applying to. But, that's a deeper discussion depending on, your specific situation and the schools that you apply to. All right. Yeah, like I said, if there are specific questions regarding, I have so many years of experience in this field, what are my possibilities and everything, just reach out to me. It's possibly not, from for the panel as such, but I would like to answer every possible question which is asked away. So if anything is not answered, please just reach out to me directly. Okay. Someone has said that, my question is for Nilesh. With respect to INSEAD language criteria, can the exit language be Tamil with the native language as Hindi?
I think it's best to check with the admission committee. I would not be the right person to say here. They may accept it. I'm not very sure. There have been cases where they have accepted, let's say, Marathi as the third language. So maybe Tamil can also be, put under that category.
Yeah, that's great. And, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you all have questions, please write to the admissions committee. There is an email given on their website for any questions. So attending these events, someone I think asked about, how do I find out the events which are conducted by these schools? You have to sign up on their website, right? You sign up on their website and they will, start emailing you events as and when they are happening. I also want to say that many events happen at times which are not very friendly for the Indian applicant pool. But I must say that I know people who are waking up at 3:30 in the morning to attend these webinars or these events or these coffee chats. Okay, so it's just a few months, and the MBA is gonna even, it's gonna be like drinking from a fire hose. So this is your prep. So it's totally fine even if you're waking up at 3:30 in the morning and doing that. It's for yourself. So that is one way to kind of attend these events. Always try to get attend these small virtual coffee chats, smaller intimate events. Many clubs, student clubs also host events. Try to attend those to kind of get a feel for what these clubs are and what they teach. Another thing I would also say is that go on YouTube channels for these schools. Many post videos. You will understand, as far as your industry is concerned, what is the school's outlook on that? If they have a specific video in terms of classroom experience, on the school, on the YouTube channel, on the YouTube channels, that will also give you a feel of things, basically. And today, we are spoiled for information. I mean, you just have to Mr. Google just throws out anything, any question that you ask for. So there's very little reason for anyone to say that I didn't know these events or whatever. You may have a great profile, you may have a differentiated profile to some degree, but doing that research is of paramount importance. Knowing what is it that you're trying to gain from the program, because like I think one of the panelists said that it's these are trained eyes. They've been reading applications for a long time. You have to be authentic. Your voice has to be authentic in whatever you write. This is only so much about actually not really about fancy English, but about what is your story and why do you need an MBA. So thank you everyone for making the time. We had over 100 attendees, and the recording will be sent to anyone everyone who made it or did not make it. And I think I really want to thank all the panelists for first making the time. You guys are done with your applications. You're like onwards and upwards to your journey, but y'all have taken a pause and just come here, agree to chat with us, and share a lot of information very generously. And I really wanted to thank each one of you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thanks, Preeti.
Thanks, Preeti.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Absolutely happy to answer if there are any follow-up questions and I can help. I'm happy to answer at any point of time.
Thank you so much, Rajan. If I, in the next 1 week or 2 months, whatever, if I get specific questions for you guys, I will make sure I'll send them your way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, it was a
Thank
pleasure.
you everyone for coming and joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.